Welcome to Self Wellness.
Hope everybody had a great 4th of July and all fingers are still attached. Good morning and welcome to Maha with Mike. Today we're going to be going into the truth behind what we eat, what we're told about what we eat, and what it's doing to our health. First, I'd like to start with something that's become farly too normal. Highly processed meats, sugary drinks, you guys know the stuff. The Red Bulls, the Monsters, the energy drinks, the prepackaged snacks, and that bacon cheeseburger that smells so good when you're at the 7-Eleven gas station. Yeah, it's cheap, but what the heck is it actually doing to our health? The evidence is piling up. Cancer, heart disease, diabetes. These aren't just words that are on a warning label anymore. It's become the norm. It's personal. We have loved ones that are affected, and it's highly preventable. So why are these products still everywhere? Who profits from keeping them on the shelves? And what can we actually do about it? Joining us first is our favorite nutrition researcher and epidemiologist, Nick Holscher, who's going to walk us through the science, the stats, and the hidden cost of these ultra-processed addictions. That's right, addictions. Then in the second half of my show, we're going to dive even deeper with my favorite controversial outspoken scientist, Dr. Judy Mikovits, who's been on the front lines of the war between public health and institutional power. And we'll also be talking about the NIH and the shifting rules around public access to scientific research that was just moved up from December to July, and what these changes mean for medical freedom and scientific transparency. So sit back, grab a glass of water, yes, just water, and hopefully it's hydrogen water from your water bottle that you got from airwaterhealing.com. This is Maha with Mike, and the show starts right now. Nick, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, buddy, does anything scream health to you like Joey Chestnut shoving back 70 hot dogs in 10 minutes on a 4th of July celebration with all those carbs? You see they stick the bread into the water and then they shove it into the mouth. I saw the highlights and I was just like, I can only imagine the parasite growing inside of that man's stomach.
Oh yeah. You know, as long as he's only doing it once a year, hopefully. You know, I don't know how often he's doing it, but if he's doing it often, based on this study that just came out of Nature Medicine, it's a disaster, right? And so
walk us through that. Walk us through the study, and I think if Drake has access to it, he'll pull it up too. But we need to know, what is the long-term damage of nitrates? I mean, you know that when women are pregnant, they tell them to avoid the subs, like do not go to the deli department, because they know how bad it is for a developing fetus. How bad is it for us?
Right. So this study was what's called a burden of proof meta-analysis. So it was a systematic review of collecting every single study they could find in the peer-reviewed literature that was measuring these associations between processed meat, sugary beverages, trans fats, which is in a lot of baked goods, a lot of fries, some donuts, you know, but it's been phased out, but it's still in some foods. But so what they did, they literally collected everything they could, and they pooled it into those graphs, as you can see on the screen there, which is what's measured as relative risk. So compared to eating no processed meat, what does eating 0.6 grams to 57 grams a day do, which is a very small dose, right? If you think of 0.6 grams, that's like eating a bite of a processed hot dog, you know, with nitrates or nitrites. So basically what they found was but this is daily consumption, right? So daily consumption of just small amounts of processed meat, sugary drinks, or trans fats can raise the risk of type 2 diabetes, colorectal cancer, and heart disease, right? So that is clearly something we don't want as those rates skyrocket among the population, as chronic disease skyrockets among the population. We do still have to pay attention to these hyper-processed foods. They're not good for us. And, this is pretty strong evidence. And it's not just the epidemiological evidence as shown in this study. It's the biological mechanisms of these, right? So let's take processed meat, for example, right? So like I mentioned earlier, so Processed meat is when they're adding all these synthetic chemicals to it to preserve it, to make it last long. But in addition, when you cook those types of meats, it does produce carcinogenic compounds that you also consume. But when we say processed meats, right? If you go to like the local butcher shop and you get like fresh, belly slices, and they don't add any preservatives, you're not going to face those increased risks, right? So when we're talking about this, we're talking about like literally the unhealthy like beef franks that you read the ingredient list and you see about 10 things. That's what this study's talking about. And sugary beverages, obviously, that's a disaster. It just drastically spikes your insulin levels, causes all sorts of problems when you drink it on the daily. And then trans fats, that's been well established to be very dangerous for the human body, decades ago already. So, yeah, this study kind of just confirms our observations of the past many decades.
Well, and we've known for a long time that the World Health Organization, with a lot of the stuff that they put out there is can be absolute crap, but they do list processed meat as a group 1 carcinogen, meaning that there is more than enough evidence to show that it is causing cancer in humans. And when you talked about it, just 50 grams, that's 2 slices of bacon. So, and again, this isn't going out and getting like pork belly and throwing it right into some beef tallow. This is when you go to the restaurant or the gas station and they're grabbing it from a pack that's been sitting in the fridge for 21 days so it doesn't go bad, because they put all of these preservatives in it. But not only are we having to deal with these these nitrates in the food causing cancer, but as you and I were talking about, now we're talking about the high processed meats and an increase in blood pressure and LDL, which is bad cholesterol, or that we know of it. But not only that, but the clogging of the arteries, because all those preservatives, our body doesn't know what to do with it. And now with type 2, type 3, and type 1 diabetes, it is no wonder why they want to keep us sick. Right. And now that we're starting to understand that some of these pharmaceutical companies have holdings in the food companies, the foods that are making us sick are being treated by the same companies that own them.
Right. It's just a big money making scheme, big scam. They started rolling out all this unhealthy processed garbage 30, 40 years ago, and it's just so bad, especially in America, right? We know in Europe they banned a lot of these ingredients already, and their populations are much healthier than America, who has one of the highest chronic disease burdens in the entire world, which is very bad. So yeah, we want to get away from that. Look at that video there. That's nasty. Why do you want to be eating that? Just go get free range unprocessed meats, right? We do know meats do have a lot of benefits. Just don't go to 7-Eleven. Don't buy the cheapest one, if you care about your health. And so now one other thing that's gone through the Maha movement is, they don't like to talk about foods. They only like to talk about mRNA injections as contributing to a lot of things. But we have to remember, processed foods are still bad, right? We still have to pay attention to everything else other than just vaccines, right? Vaccines obviously have contributed to a lot of chronic disease, and I mean a lot, and have been absolutely disastrous. But that doesn't take away these other things that are also causing negative health effects.
And I'm glad that you bring that up, because the more and more that we go back to the Hippocrates, right, and let thy food be thy medicine, I think Maha has spent a lot of time just going after vaccines and mRNA technology and not going back to the simple facts of what we can do to drastically, because you can't change anything outside of your child's life other than just avoiding bringing them to a pediatrician and then go home and give them sugary cereal, and you're packing them sliced ham with all of these nitrates, and then you wonder why their gut health is absolutely savaged and ripped apart. And we have to start questioning, what is it that these parents can do, and not only be able to save money, but it's the same exact thing that I've noticed when you are like on a cruise, right? If you go on a cruise, you only have access to what's on the ship. So if you went on an organic, cruise, there's no sneaking a snack in. So we have to start getting back to the family values of, when grandma would cook, she would cook a meal and everybody would go home with leftovers, right? So go get that slow cooker or go get that pressure cooker. And it's not as hard as people think to go out there and get lean cut meat, get your fresh cuts, get your plain yogurt, get your milk and your butter, or get your ghee, or get your eggs and your whole grains, and stay away from anything that is a packaged snack or a canned soup. Or, I think the worst thing in the world that these college kids are eating is those instant noodles. I think those instant noodles are going to lead to instant death. So bad. If you read the ingredients, there's enough sodium in there to salt an entire cow.
Yeah, there's so many bad things, especially you go to these college dormitories and they have like these small snack stations, and it's all garbage, right? There's not one healthy thing you can find there. But there was also a recent study that came out that found how glyphosate is highly cancerous, right? They tested it in rats. They threw glyphosate on all these rats over the period of a few years, and a lot of them actually, among the rats that were given glyphosate, they developed 12 distinct different types of cancers. And so we know that glyphosate now is highly dangerous, highly carcinogenic, and so that's in a lot of our foods now. And it's widely sprayed everywhere. Especially you go to golf courses, right? They're spraying Roundup everywhere. You're coming into contact with it. It's in all our foods, right? It's in a large proportion of our foods, actually. And so obviously if you can stick to organic, that is helpful. Now, obviously organic can even still have some pesticide residues, unfortunately. But it's better to try for that, to try and avoid this glyphosate. And one other study that came out recently was 1 in 4 U.S. babies have no bifidobacterium in their gut. So it's disappearing completely. 25% of babies are missing a critical keystone strain in their gut.
And the worst part of it is we don't have a government that is going to make these bans immediately. You see some of these ingredients that have been linked to ADHD, that have been linked to cancer, and then you hear on the news, oh, we're going to try to phase it out by December of 2027. We have to start making the switch now. If we start voting with our dollars, Nick, and we avoid these ultra processed, you think these companies will change? 100% they will. When you start boycotting and you start saying, hey, you know what? We've got a bunch of mommy groups and a bunch of, influencers out there that are getting this information out there. We have to make it known to the public that this is a drastic shift that needs to happen immediately. If not, we're going to have some disease that is going to run through this country like a flood.
Right. And we see, obviously, the government just moves at the speed of a snail, right? So slow. We honestly, we were promised, or not necessarily promised, but I remember RFK stating before he got confirmed as secretary that he would actually initiate a public health emergency on the very first day he gets in and wipe out all this dangerous stuff, wipe out the mRNA injections, do all this stuff. But that hasn't happened, and so it appears that the only way to really make that drastic change quickly would be to announce an emergency. But that it carries all sorts of implications, and they might try and throw him out of secretary position if he did that. But nonetheless, it appears that is what is actually needed as Americans continue to suffer.
And a lot of it has to do with, and for any of our listeners who don't understand, is that there's no single branch, right? Executive, legislative, judicial, that can actually unilaterally make decisions. There is so much compromise across these branches that even if the president supports a policy, it won't become a law until Congress passes it. And then even if they pass it, the courts can go in and still overturn it and then say it's unconstitutional. And when you understand that with the United States, with our checks and balances, we have so much to go over and understand that there are so many layers of rules and departments when you talk about the government moving at the speed of a sail. These approvals slow down decisions, and making them and implementing them are actually so hard. I've got a friend of mine that was telling me a story about there was I think it was like a 2-stall men's and a 2-stall women's bathroom in like New York City. And they're like, oh, it took the government like 3 years and like $18 million to build it. And the guy was like, I could get it done in 3 months. And it just goes to show you that, like, even if just building a bathroom is so hard, between permits and then the city and then the zoning and then shutting this street down to run a water line and then doing this and doing that, how can we fix the healthcare system? The way that you look at it is you can't. What you have to fix is what happens inside of your home. That's why the more and more that we understand that the Maha movement is more about make yourself healthy again. Yes, we stand for making America healthy again. I surely do. But I know that it has to start at home. It has to start with you. It starts with not going to Starbucks. And when you brew your coffee, do it with a single source, mold-free, mycotoxin, slow French press at home with ultra purified hydrogen rich water, which I'm still not convinced that the hydrogen lasts as long in the hot water, but still, at least I know it was really clean water going into my French press, and starting to realize that everything that can make the government money or the company's money is probably going to cost us at our health, which is why it's so expensive to shop for organic, but it's a heck of a lot less expensive than fighting a disease later in life because of poor decisions. So what do you think, Nick, is the next big step that we can do to take our freedom and health back and start waging the war on these ultra-processed ingredients and educating people?
Well, you're right about, since the government does move so slow, we do have to act in our own households. We do have to make our own health decisions. And at this point in time, we have to realize, we can't rely on the government to properly give us the proper recommendations needed. Maybe 10 years down the line, with these changes, we might finally see all this stuff removed. But right now, you can go to a health store or a health foods grocery store that sells a lot of organic stuff, sells a lot of natural stuff, none of this garbage that you see at even stores like Target carry a lot of garbage. You can go and buy these healthy foods and just bypass all of that, right? You don't have to wait until it's banned. Just educate yourself on the risks of ultra processed foods, and you can start to make a difference, obviously not only for your health but for your family's health as well. And while you await the government, I think that is definitely the best step to do that. And the government, to work faster, it's going to be hard. I guess we haven't really seen drastic changes in our government, in the snap of a finger in such a long time, other than when they roll out emergency countermeasures. And so I guess they should do the same thing. They should do the same thing with these toxic things. Declare an emergency, get rid of them, right? We know they're bad. But then you'll have some pushback saying that that's some sort of totalitarian approach of just declaring what's bad and what's not. But at this point in time, we do have decades and decades of evidence supporting that these things are bad. Why they really, there should be no company at this point in time still putting red 40, yellow lake number 5 in any product, right? In any product. And so it is going to take taking the profits away from these companies to really get them to make differences.
Yeah. And, I think that more and more that people understand that there are some natural preservatives, right? So if you do get something with a preservative, let's choose a salt or an organic sugar over Pripal gallate or some of these other, very hard to read, preservatives that are out there, because we don't know the long-term effect. But back in the Bible, they were salting the fish, right? They were putting salt on the meats, thousands of years ago. And I don't think it was leading to the types of issues that we're seeing today in these children. So the more and more that we understand that these synthetic preservatives, these sodium benzonates and the potassium sorbates and all of these really, really bad nitrates that they're putting inside to keep a meat, to where you can bring this food and it can sit in the deli shelf, for months and months and months on end. Those are the profit makers for the people, and it's not good for the human race. And I think the more and more that we start to understand that the cause and effect of all of the stuff that they're putting inside of these foods can easily be avoided, but I think it's going to have to take a shift in convenience, right? Because a lot of what we do is about convenience.
Right, right. A lot of families cannot afford organic food, unfortunately, because it is so expensive now, especially with inflation after 2020. A lot of America is under the poverty line, unfortunately. And yeah, they literally cannot buy it. If they do buy it, they'll lose their house or they'll be homeless. That's how expensive it's become. So obviously, yeah, that is a key step. They got to start making these organic foods, unprocessed foods, more affordable. There's no reason that they should be unobtainable by a large proportion of America. Once you make it obtainable, once you put it in all of these stores across the country, all these kind of lower cost stores, it's going to make a big difference.
And I think that the government needs to do a better job of explaining, or doing representation to younger children, and I wonder why we have so many pre-diabetics in this country. And you see like these teenagers walking Starbucks and their Dunkin' Donuts with their frozen frappuccinos. And I saw a video the other day on Rumble where the guy was showing like one of the best selling like pecan frozen drinks from Dunkin' Donuts, and it had 156 grams of sugar in it. And when he showed it to you like in a cup, it was like in like a solo cup, it was filled up almost half the way. And I'm like, for the body to be able to absorb that much sugar in one sitting, there is no way that these children are going to end up with a healthy adulthood if they're consuming 2 or 3 of those a week. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, they will have a very hard time being healthy as they consume dumps and mounds of sugar via liquid. So they're just absorbing all of this sugar at an extremely fast rate. And yeah, it's not good. Like we saw in that study we talked about earlier, that new study that compiled all that evidence of the past few decades that sugary drinks did increase the risk of type 2 diabetes by about, I believe it was 8%. And even, 8% risk of type 2 diabetes. And even it also increased the risk of heart disease, these sugary drinks. I believe that was by about 2%. So, we don't give your kids this stuff. Give them naturally sweet, like lightly sweetened drinks if they need something sweet. But obviously, we still want to stay away from fake sweeteners, synthetic sweeteners like aspartame and sucralose, right? You still don't want those. Those can still be detrimental, cancerous, and cause all sorts of issues as well. So honestly, if you can, stick with water. Stick with water. If you want the most optimal health, drink water like humans have done for hundreds of thousands of years.
And then I think the next most important thing for people to understand is detox. If you have been living a lifestyle, if you have been eating these foods that are you're going to have, a sluggish gallbladder, a sluggish liver, there are a lot of good things out there that people can do to detox. And I think that the more and more that we get the country to understand the benefits of intermittent fasting and trying to give your body a set to your microbiome or your gut, which we now know is your first brain. We've got to give it a chance to have a reset. And I think that's another really important. What do you think about a general detox for people who have been eating poorly over the past decade?
Yeah, that's a good idea. And they do what's called sometimes these juice detoxes, right? Where you kind of just drink juice and you don't eat anything for a week or two at a time. And then you have these long-term fasts, and then you have intermittent fasting, obviously, which is not eating for a large portion of the day. And so, yeah, I think if you've been eating garbage for such a long period of time, um, it's never too late to make the choice to switch to healthy food, to switch to a healthy diet. And I think a lot of people will be surprised at the positive health outcomes that will come out of it, right? They'll feel better, they'll probably sleep better. They're drastically will be lowering their risk of obesity, heart disease, cancer, all sorts of things. So people have to understand just how important the diet really is. And yeah, again, never too late to make the switch to healthy foods.
Awesome, Nick. Thank you so much for diving deep with us on this topic. And I think the more and more that we understand why they put these preservatives in the foods, why there's so many nitrates inside this processed meats, is because they want to expand the shelf life. And whether or not there's a direct or indirect link to cancer, diabetes, who cares if the companies that are treating all of those diseases are owned by a same oligarchy corporation that owns all of the food and meat processing plants and the grocery stores and the delivery trucks that bring us to it anyways. So we have to make a decision. How do we find your Substack, and how does my crew find you after hours?
Yes, you can follow our Substack at thefocalpoints.com. It's myself, Dr. Peter McCullough, John Leake. We post there daily. And you can also follow my personal X account at NIC Hulsher, and I post there daily as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, brother. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be bringing in your favorite doctor, Dr. Judy Mikovits. Hey guys, Maha Mike here. I've got some exciting news for you. Our new partners at Farm Easy Bank are leading the way in affordable, trustworthy healthcare, bringing an impressive lineup of generic medications at prices that your family can actually afford. Not only that, but they are now offering ivermectin and fenbendazole, two compounds that are gaining attention, and unless you've been sleeping under a rock, you've probably heard about their incredible benefits. You can trust every single order that you get from Farm Easy Bank. Why? Because they come from reputable, reliable sources, and their commitment to quality means you get the same effectiveness you'd expect from the big box store without the outrageous price tags. In fact, you can save up to 80%. That's right, 80% compared to traditional pharmacy prices. On top of that, they offer fast, discreet shipping to the comfort of your home. And the best part is, you can use the coupon code MAHA2025 for 20% off any order over $199. This is a limited time offer, so don't wait. Take control of you and your family's health today. And stock up, because you would rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. So go to Farm Easy Bank, that's PharmEasyBank.com/Maha and start your wellness journey with trusted support and serious savings. There was a sweeping Maha movement this week, and it was a really big win for the Maha team. And we're going to be bringing in Dr. Judy Mikovits to cover what's happening at the NIH and what they moved up from December to just a few days ago. Dr. Judy, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
Good.
I have no idea.
Grand Rising.
Yeah. Yes.
How are you?
Wonderful. Well, I'm doing pretty well, but I have no idea what you're talking about happened at the NIH.
So they moved forward. Dr. Jay Bhattacharya delivered a sweeping Maha win. So they're basically removing the paywalls, and they were able to move forward. So as soon as something is published or funded by the NIH, it's now required to be made public as soon as it publishes. So basically, it's helping with the censorship. And there was a public policy access implementation that was moved from the end of December to July 1st. So I think that's pretty good that there's a little bit of transparency, and it's directly because of the new NIH director.
Well, that is wonderful news. Yeah, those paywalls Yeah, nobody out in small business could ever get those journal articles before 6 months
Yep.
after they were published. It always put small business, behind the curve, and that was actually taxpayers' money. That was uh, literally the universities and the corruption in the press, as in the scientific medical literature, was a huge problem because people would continue to go on data that was old, or and in fact we the people paid to do that work and publish that work, and it should never be in the universities. Now he needs to end the extramural program and bring it all back to taxpayer funded and taxpayer um, benefits, not universities, and that corrupt system that Trump and Kennedy are trying to fix there at the university level. That's always been,
Ab-
that is the central.
no, absolutely, 100%. How was your weekend? I know that you were down in Florida last week. You've been quite the busy person running around. How was the Health Freedom Rally?
Oh, well, we did, yeah, we were in Florida for about 10 days, did 8 different cities. We started up above in Clearwater, and then traveled to Venice Beach for Stay Awake Venice, a General Flynn sponsored event, and just stay awake and teaching. Then we were also in Spring Hill at the OM Functional Welcome OM Functional Medicine and Hippocrates. Boy, what great health care is happening, and just ending the censorship just shows everybody what um, decades really. Sorry, it just got a call in there. So what we've known for so many decades, and in fact, it was Pastor Casper McLeod right now. He was in Venice Beach, and just a lot of music, a lot of nice fun. Then we moved on to the Thrive 25 with Jeremiah Hosea from the Stop the Shots, and CC from Hospital Homicide. I think, let's see, Todd Callender was there. Yeah, Sheriff, Congress, a lot happening in Florida in a good way. And it's really just ending the censorship and allowing us to teach what we've known for decades. Really the truth behind healthcare and what's been happening to poison. Our food supply, everything we've talked about. It was really a great week though. And then we finished up in Denver. Last weekend with the third annual of a big community healing health fair. Henry Ely, Lee Merritt, Carrie Madej, who was in both places with me in Venice Beach, and then rounded it out there in Denver. So yeah, it was 2 weeks pretty much since Father's Day, but really taking Florida and the East Coast and trying to get everybody just out there on their vacations to see how much fun it is. A lot of music, a lot of fun, community centers, and we'll keep doing it, because there's so much good out there that's been there for so long, and we just simply don't know it.
I know you followed a little bit of this story. When they got the little ones running around, I mute it so that way you're not hearing any of the transfer of children from room to room. You've been following a story about the brave doctor, who right now, I believe Dr. Moore is facing up to 35 years in prison for choosing not to inject his patients with what he knew was poison. Have you been following that story closely? Do you plan on going out to Utah for any of those hearings, or are you just praying from afar?
Well, I'm praying all the time, but yeah, I'm not. I haven't been invited or asked to serve as an expert witness, which I've done for many years in all areas. But I'm pretty much just praying all the time for all the doctors that have been under attack, the teachers and the doctors. Would in fact some of the people you just had on should be charged with those same crimes. I mean, we've got to just have stop the lawfare against people who practice their own beliefs, their own their own way of saying their sovereign ability to choose the kind of health care they want. This just has to end. It's just lawfare, and it's gone on for 45 years. So haven't been following it closely, but pray nonstop to stop this. It's insane.
Well, one of the things that I know you're passionate about, and I know it wasn't a talking point for today, but I want to give you a little bit of floor space to talk about oncogenics and what you guys are doing with Dr. Group. I think that it is absolutely incredible. I've seen a remarkable turnaround in my mom. And I don't know if you've gotten a new bottle, but the V3 or the version 3, not to be confused with the air purifier V3 that I sent you last year, the Oncogenics V3 is a lot easier to get into the teaspoon. I think they made it or emulsified it a little bit better. I don't know what the new batch did, but can we talk a little bit about Oncogenics? And this is a product that you've been working on for decades, and with all of the research that you've known, talk to us about Oncogenics and why you brought it to life or back to life.
Well, yeah, that's precisely what we're talking about in the beginning, because of course, since 2006, 2005, I worked with a company called Genius Omnitura. Both were at UC Santa Barbara, and affiliated with UC Santa Barbara. That came out of my work all the way through the 80s and 90s at the National Cancer Institute. So we in fact we held these patents for, essentially the spike protein of every gain of function virus since HIV. We had developed through 2011 there when I co-founded a neuroimmune institute to look at the neuroimmune diseases, like diseases that are inappropriately named, things like chronic Lyme, which is actually just another variant of HIV, an XMRV. So we worked with Genius Omnitura and Epigenics Pharmaceuticals on using combination therapies and botanical drugs, according to the 2004 Botanical Drug Guidance Act. So none of these things have any authority with the FDA. So I talked to Ed for the last couple of years, as you know, Ed Group and John Group there, as I saw the state of the art drug development and every kind of thing that I built into our 3 labs, which I designed both in the University of Nevada at that Neuroimmune Institute, as well as Building 567 back in the National Cancer Institute, and the Epigenics labs in Carlsbad, California. Well, we lost all of that because of 9/11 and the corruption that followed those 4 years, but we continued to develop the patents and use them in clinical trials, present them to the government, to Merck. And basically I said, okay, Ed, we need an oral IV product line. We need orally bioavailable. The microsomal processing, the biophotonic water, the gold, the nano gold, and everything about the processing in Phoenix was so beautiful that I knew we had the technology that we didn't have back in 2005. So we had to make pills and capsules. Now we have what we need to make a complete oral IV line. They've already made B17, liquid amygdalin, as you know, an oral IV vitamin C, bioavailable to the level that you don't have to do infusions, because of course these infusions are loaded with corn syrup and heavy metals, and not at all insulin, not at all nutrients from plants, as we're missing. That was the key to the oncogenics. So we developed that using that patent and the data, and then just advanced it 15 years, and the product is the third version of it. It was a little bit too strong, so we backed off on a couple of things, and wow, I mean the combined with the ProImmune and the Cardio Miracle get those foundational nutrients for all things COVID. And yeah, we're just delighted at what we're seeing. I had no doubt, of course, but if we don't have to put a needle on it, then the government, then the FDA, none of them have any authority, and will truly achieve the kind of natural products medicine along with the drugs that were made, because that was the patent, to use it very, very low dose. Drugs that you showed on the last commercial, like ivermectin, the old drugs that don't cost the taxpayer anything. And if we just use the technologies, lights, every we can do now in the space. We've been doing it, as you know, with Dr. Michael Karlfeld at the Karlfeld Center, back with Dr. Klinghardt, and these things are just testing in Seattle, just testing beautifully, and people are starting to see really almost instant benefits. It's really very simple when you have some nutrition to support the pathways that God gave you to heal. We're nutrient deficient. These are the AIDS, acquired immune disease. They're not genetic, and all we have to do is understand the poisons, understand the nature of the word virus means poison, and then just the terrain, what's necessary to heal it at the stem cell level. And it just allows us to synergize with all kinds of technologies and have better and better and better outcomes, as you experience as well. We're excited for sure.
And one of the things that I want to point out there is I love that you do not turn off the ability to blend the worlds, right? So you've got the full nutraceutical and even Dr. Group with global healing. When you give them the data, right? There's so many people that are out there that are naturopaths that are so against anything that's synthetic, and they're against anything. And now you've got people like Dr. Group that are like, yes, I understand that methylene blue is synthetic, but if we create it properly and it's done in a lab setting and it's not touching plastics, it's not touching glass, and it's being done and dosed right, and we're mixing it with high dose vitamin C, we're able to create some things that are so beautiful. And when you start talking to somebody about ivermectin and cancer, right, they just look at you and they go, oh, you're just one of those Trump horse worm guys and you're blah blah blah. The second that you understand that, first of all, we're not saying that all cancers are molds, and we're not saying that all cancers are parasites. But what we're saying is that ivermectin is effectively inducing apoptosis, which is cell death. And when you combine that with things like ProImmune, Cardio Miracle, and you get the liver support and oncogenics, you're giving your body a chance to be able to let the immune system do what it does best. I don't think that ivermectin alone is a standalone cure, but when you start building your body's terrain back up and you stop eating the garbage that is in the inner aisles of the grocery store and you go back to doing a biblical diet, eating the way, and I'm not saying you got to be John the Baptist and go dip your locusts in your honey, but please stay away from these ultra processed foods and the things that are going to make us sick. But I love that you are always looking at the research.
Well, we did the research, and the taxpayers paid for it since 1980 at the National Cancer Institute. And in fact, most of the journal articles right now are fraud. And in fact, all of them since 2014 have a fraudulent component, as well as every public every commercial on TV. They're fraud, because in fact, cancer isn't a parasite. That's just not even a thing. Parasites are anything that rob oxygen, including 5G towers. The minute you rob oxygen from your red blood cells, one of those 10 to the ninth, I think it's 1 billion, I think it's nano is a billionth. So we make a protection pathway, a protection pathway single poison. Molds do different things. You don't inject molds. See, we've been injecting molds into our cows, into our pigs, into our chickens. I mean, we were with Sherry Tenpenny there at the Venice Beach and at Thrive 25, and Sherry Tenpenny's new book, Zero Accountability. You see, the research has already been done. And in fact, as I said, half of what ivermectin is a Wnt pathway modulator and a purinergic pathway modulator. And I showed you that John Hewlett paid for the independent study with light clustering and spectral clusterings, light. So shine a light on it to show you that it hit the Wnt pathway. We need the CBNs for the endocannabinoid pathway. We've got the CBNs and the cystis incinus that Dr. Klinghardt showed for the very lizard and snake venom protein protections. These comes from plants, from Sardinia. Everything we know. This is the gift of Ed and John group and that group, because we've done this. That was my job, fermentation chemistry. That you're not targeting a pathogen. Your immune system takes care of that, but you never inject it again. We can never inject. You don't live on somebody else's IVIG. That's criminal. IVIG. Oh, I'm going to get immunoglobulins from 10 normal donors. Show me 10 normal donors in this country. Everything they've done since 1980, as we as we discovered the pathways and the technologies to heal according to nature, and how rapamycin is a fermentation product, and the pathway is called mammalian target of rapamycin. All mammalians use that target. It's called mTOR for energy metabolism, to use your pancreas. Oh, AI in the corrupt literature is calling it mechanistic target. No, it's not. It's God's nature. It's God's natural product. So all they've done is rename all these diseases, spin the wheel, create a corrupt, everything synthetic. Nothing in the division of biologics is a biologic. I mean, I'm sorry, and what and what we've been stopped from using is our brains and the natural products and what the taxpayers pay for. Ivermectin is a purinergic modulator and a Wnt modulator. And if you don't know what those are, then you shouldn't be in this game, and you certainly shouldn't be poisoning people or calling yourself a doctor or a scientist when you're not. And so again, the naturopaths, the chiropractors, everybody else is just as wrong. No, we make drugs from fermentation. Nattokinase is neither natto nor a kinase. It's a fermentation product that was stabilized to bond for a very particular microbe that keeps you balanced according to a certain pathway and a certain poison. The paper's 1980, and it was a Japanese guy, and that's been removed from the literature. So the other thing that has to happen is every bit of the literature prior to 2011 that was on the internet and is being criminally, fraudulently kept from the people as to the meeting and now rewritten. Those aren't new studies. How about Betty Martini and all she did in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with all the quote unquote sugar? It's not a germ and it's not sugar, it's glucose, fructose. You can't get, fruit juices. I was surprised by oh my God, it's not fruit juice, it's in glass. In a grocery store, all the food isn't food, it's irradiated, and the stuff that's sprayed through the vents at night, a little dioxin. Oh, everything in every shot, dipping eggs in Clorox so they break the shell, and you got every poison in the grocery store. Butchering pork in the same place you butcher beef. You don't put the viruses of a cow anywhere in the parasites anywhere near your food. That's the problem. And it's not food. You're irradiated. If there's a USDA label on it, don't buy it. In fact, don't go at all. That is the message. Everything in the store is adulterated and irradiated and dead. And that's another thing that, global healing will never do. It's not liposomal formulations. No, that's a lipopolysaccharide. That's allowing spike proteins to proliferate. Where are they going to go when the cells die? Which what you just said. Oncogenics. We're driving not only apoptosis, but we're driving lipophagy. So we actually metabolize those fats. That's what proimmune is. If you can't get into ketosis because you've done hypoxic rewiring of your tricarbolic TCA cycle, none of your doctors, nobody could read that science paper of 2009, except the corrupt reviewers, um, Jonathan Stoye's student, and Tony Komaroff. Who are those people? Just go look up Tony Komaroff. Look at why hasn't something been done with them. And DARPA, when they reviewed those data in April 2009, we presented everything that was in oncogenics and the oral IV, the TET2 line, the B17. You know how much the Richardsons and America have suffered. I mean, when the literature is just fraud, it's not science, and that is the problem. So we just took the bull by the horns and said, you know what? I'm not asking for permission. I don't need to ask the FDA. These things are God's nature. The 2004 Botanical Drug Guidance Act says I can use it, and if I don't stick a needle in you, get out of my clinic. Gotcha.
Which is why the microsomal technology is probably going to change the world and the way that the things are doing. When I went out there and I spent a couple days with Dr. Group and Global Healing and really understanding, what they're doing, with their glutathione, their vitamin E, the oncogenics that they're doing with you, the new liposomal B17, and understanding that they're utilizing they're utilizing glycerosomes, right? So these are microscopic lipid-based carriers that are created from organic cold-pressed phospholipids, and they're also using structured water. I looked at Dr. Group. I was like, dude, you must have spent $100,000 on this structured water system. And he goes, add about 10 more $100,000s on it. And I'm like, anybody that spends $1 million to make sure that their biophotonic water and the structuring and the Vogel crystal that it runs over, I'm like, if you love water that much, you know that you're putting true heart and passion into what you're creating. And, when he showed me the tubing that they used, he's like, regular laboratories, he goes, they use tubing that costs like 3 cents a meter. He's like, ours is like $100 a meter. Like they're using so that way no microplastics are leaching into any of their products. And it's just absolutely incredible.
They rotate the plants and use sound wave so this is truly a call of nature. We've got our which is a soil, it's a phyla that's close to it, and it literally in the soil, the various archaea allow the plant to take up the oils and get rid of the plastics in the soils and the glyphosate. Everything about that lab, I call up people. I don't work for them, but I call up people and say, John, can we tour the lab this week, my friends? Because when you see that, this country's got everything we need, and we can grow, baby, grow, and we can get the soil, the way it's sourced, the nanos, the lasers, healing for the ages, the conference with Brian Artis, Ed Group, Dr. Henry Ely, I mentioned a minute ago, with us in Denver, and Jana Schmidt, Honey Bee. They're able to extract according to nature and use the nutrients that have been removed, and this is just food, and it's food made into medicine. The way that's the cool thing. The minute the 2004 Botanical Drug Guidance Act came out, our two companies were just holding on for dear life after 911, Epigenetics and Genius, Omnitura. And we saw that law, and we didn't care what was going on in the world. We just had the fun of doing these things. And you could see the delight in my face, because I just get chills down my spine, because all I did was call Ed and said, we need to do this now. And he's, how about Wednesday? I'll pay for your flight. And it's just, and we went to Houston and we did this back in February. And I thought, you know what, we can do this in a heartbeat. Who cares what they do? Let's just give them the food they need. And we can have, I see it like little 5-hour energies where you have an oncogenics and neurogenics, every single variant, doesn't matter where it came from. We know God's pathways, and we've used those tools. In all of the work the taxpayers paid for, you're going to get it back. That's how you make yourself healthy again and make America healthy again.
Absolutely. Dr. Judy, give us your Substack, give us your handle, give us your Twitter, just so that way my group can follow you, because the work that you're doing is so beautiful. And, you know, I only trust you as much as I do, because I've seen how much they try to discredit you. I love when you go online and they basically make you look like you're a terrorist. And I'm like, whenever the government works so hard to suppress one person, you know that they're shaking in their boots and they're very scared about what they know, because that's the people that they go after. They only go after the truth tellers, and they only go after the people that can bring harm to their agenda. And your walk with Jesus, oh my gosh, I can tell you, I've seen it. He is conformed. He has changed your heart, and it really is beautiful to see, because you have become a fisher of men just like me. And your Twitter handle, your Substack, and how can we support you? 60 seconds.
Well, I'm Dr. Judy A. Mikovits on X. We run a book club. TheRealDrJudy.com is where everything is. Our Substacks, our newsletters, whatever's up there is free. The education, everything we show you. Yeah, maybe it gets a little sciencey sometime, but it's a lot of fun. That TheRealDrJudy.com. Join us on Wednesday nights for our book clubs. When you listen to the truth, when you hear the truth, you know it. Yeah, it's all right there. Our goal is to educate, and we're so excited with what's happening in the Maha movement. And
well, we might have just lost Dr. Judy there, but you guys can visit her website. She's a good friend of the show. Big supporter of the Cardio Miracle. You guys can always get the Cardio Miracle right from airwaterhealing.com. If you guys do the subscribe and save, please do not forget to check out Farm Easy Bank and use the promo code MAHA 2025. I'm going to do an in-depth story about how that company has done miracles, and more importantly, my personal testimony when we are on our complete healing journey. Guys, please, companies like Farm Easy Bank, they are making this possible. Go to farmeasybank.com, use the promo code MAHA 2025, and on orders over $199, you guys are going to save, I think, 20%. Big, and the stuff comes, it gets delivered quickly. Trusted company, and they're doing wonderful work, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys on the next episode of Maha with Mike. God bless.